I have already covered the introduction to what is philosophy, how philosophers arrive at truth, and the Socratic method, Socrates as a paradigmatic historical philosopher, and an overview of contemporary philosophy. Section 2 covers critical thinking, research, reading, and writing in philosophy. Critical thinking is a specific skill set that promotes reflective and clear reasoning, though it is often poorly defined and infrequently taught. This section serves as a practical guide to critical thinking, research, reading, and writing for philosophy courses. Critical thinking involves skills, habits, and attitudes that enhance logical thinking and help avoid common pitfalls in everyday reasoning, such as fallacies. Studying philosophy is particularly beneficial for developing these skills, though the connection is not always made explicit. Unlike typical courses such as English, composition, philosophy demands a very unique intellectual approach, and this section provides essential advice for successfully engaging in philosophical research, reading, and writing. Some of the terminology that we will cover in this section is allostasis, the biological process whereby the body prepares itself for anticipated needs. Anchoring bias, the tendency to make estimates based on an earlier initial value. Availability heuristic, the tendency to evaluate new information based on the most recent or the most easily recalled examples. Bandwagon fallacy, the fallacy that we ought to do something or believe something because many other people do so, or many other people believe the same thing. Then there is cognitive bias, a systematic pattern of reasoning that deviates from a rationally optimal or logical judgment based on available facts and probabilities. Cognitive science, which is the study of the brain and the mechanisms underlying thought, perception, memory, emotion, and other functions of the brain, and we will cover that in the psychology section. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information that confirms or supports established beliefs. Dialectic is a method of discovering truth that comes from dialogue and uses the exchange of different points of view to arrive at a position that is more likely to be true. The Dunning-Kruger effect is the cognitive bias in which people with little expertise in a specific task rate their knowledge too highly relative to others with more knowledge. Then there is the epistemic humility, a stance in philosophical and scientific investigation that recognizes the limits of one's own ability to know truth and reality in a direct or complete way. Gambler's fallacy is the reasoning that holds that if a chance event has happened less frequently in the recent past, it is more likely to happen in the near future, or vice versa. Heuristics is the mental shortcut to rules of thumb that provide a method of problem solving that is not necessarily optimal, but it is efficient. Homeostasis is the biological process whereby the body regulates itself to maintain a state of equilibrium. Inference is the mental process that leads from one set of information, premises, data, to another, a conclusion, construction, or projection. Metacognition is the process of thinking about thinking. Again, it is beyond thinking, thinking about thinking. Metacognition engages self-awareness and higher order thinking skills so that an individual can regulate, monitor, and critically analyze their own thought processes. Principle of charity. Principle of charity is the interpretive principle that says a reader ought to interpret the author's statements in the most rational and best possible way. Representation is an information-bearing unit of thought. Representations are the objects that minds consider when they think. Steel manning is a strategy for making opposing arguments as strong as possible so that it is difficult to knock them down. Sunk cost fallacy is the fallacy of attaching a greater value to something than is warranted because a person has already invested time, resources, and emotion in that thing or person. Tribalism is the tendency for human beings to align their beliefs and attitudes with groups of people who have very similar attitudes, practices, or beliefs concerning the matter. In summation, the brain is an inference machine. Our brains indeed help us survive, find partners, and reproduce. through thought, prediction, and inference, but these natural ways of thinking do not always align with the goals of philosophy, science, history, or truth. The mind-body problem in philosophy, as it is in psychology, is a key issue in metaphysics for philosophy. It explores the relationship between the brain's physical structure and the mind's conscious experience, which biology alone cannot explain, of course. But psychology and cognitive science then step in to offer tools in order to improve our thinking by showing that our brains actively interpret the world rather than passively recording it. Cognitive biases or mental shortcuts often lead to suboptimal decisions, much like perceptual illusions. Second, overcoming cognitive biases and engaging in critical reflection. Metacognition, again, is higher order thinking. It involves reflecting on one's own thought processes, while cognition, on the other hand, refers to everyday thinking that normal human beings might encounter throughout an average day. And of course, these mental shortcuts often lead to suboptimal decisions, much like perceptual illusions. And so cognition does refer to everyday thinking. Common cognitive biases. There are several. Confirmation bias is seeking and favoring information that supports existing beliefs. Anchoring bias is relying too heavily on the first piece of information encountered when making decisions. Availability heuristic is overestimating the importance of easily recalled examples. Tribal thinking, aligning with groups and struggling to evaluate information objectively when it conflicts with other group beliefs. Bandwagon fallacy, believing or doing something simply because many others do it. Sunk cost fallacy is overvaluing things based on past investments. And gambler's fallacy is believing that past random events affect future outcomes. And then we move over to developing good habits of mind. To combat these cognitive biases, we want to develop good habits of mind. This is essential. Certain strategies include actively considering alternative viewpoints, identifying counterexamples to test arguments, using metacognition to reflect on and manage strong emotions, and practicing epistemic humility, or knowledge humility, by recognizing the limits of human knowledge and the influence of social and biological factors on what we believe to be true. And everything from millions of years ago, biologically, from the couple seconds ago, everything having a say in the matter, and factors on what we may think or believe to be true. Gathering information, evaluating sources, and understanding evidence. Of course, this is effective. And of course, internet research involves finding and evaluating information using what's called the SIFT method, S-I-F-T method, SIFT. The S stands for stop, pause, and think before accepting information. The second letter in SIFT is I, which means to investigate the source. Check the credibility of the source. So S for stop, pause, and think before accepting information. Second is to investigate the source, check the credibility of the source. The F in SIFT stands for find better coverage. Look for more reliable sources. And the T in SIFT stands for trace. Trace claims to the original context. Verify the accuracy by finding the original source. So stop, pause, and think before accepting information. Investigate the source. Check the credibility of the source. Find better coverage. Look for more reliable sources. Trace claims to the original context. And verify the accuracy by finding the original source. So stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace claims to the original context. Concerning reading philosophy, to read philosophy effectively, you can consider following these steps. Create a good environment. Sit at a table with a comfortable chair. Sit upright. Have a drink, and try to avoid distractions like TV or music, for example. Don't read philosophy in bed. All right, because we associate certain things, certain acts with certain locations. Use annotation tools. Take notes. You can underline key points, flag important sections, underline or circle terms you don't know so that you can look them up and find out what they mean, especially when using a digital text, if not a textbook or a handwritten script. Focus on ideas and arguments. Philosophy emphasizes ideas over narrative. Unlike history, history focuses on narrative. Constructing a narrative, philosophy emphasizes on constructing an idea. Concentrate on understanding arguments, methods, and evidence in philosophy. Follow a structured reading method. You could use a 3-step process. You could pre-read the text, then you can have your first read of the text, and then you could have a close read, which means you read the text again in order to engage deeply with these philosophical texts and to improve your comprehension of them. Concerning writing philosophy papers require a student to present an argument supporting a cogent or a clear defensible thesis. It involves using evidence from readings, external research, original reasoning, and applied examples as well. But the ultimate goal is to seek truth, not merely to win an argument in philosophy. Next, we will cover the early history of philosophy around the world, and so we will go into some of the history of philosophy. Stay tuned, and we'll get to talk about the Axial Age with Karl Jaspers, and we'll talk about philosophical thought that occurred in the Mediterranean, places like Mesoamerica, even Mesopotamia, right, India, China, which would lay the foundation for philosophical thought and traditions in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. So stay tuned for more.